Welcome back to Cantina Customs. In today's episode, we're going to talk just a little bit about the Return to Tatooine campaign, and more specifically on what's next. Hasbro hinted that there's more to come, but what exactly could it be? So follow along with us as we peer into the shadows of the Empire to unlock the secrets of the unknown that only the shadow can reveal. Before we talk about what's next, let's look at Hasbro's Return to Tatooine campaign as a whole. At this year's San Diego Comic-Con, Hasbro completed its Return to Tatooine poster with images of Han and Chewbacca, which we already knew about because they had released that information previously about what they were going to put in the pipeline. So for the Return to Tatooine campaign, they showed the Haslab Cantina with the 5 action figures, the Streets of Mos Eisley playset with the updated Jawa, a new sculpt of Mamonda Don, re-releases of Ponda Baba, Dr. Evazan, and Bom Vimden, a new Luke Skywalker, a newish kit-bashed Tusken Raider with a new Bantha, and up in the right-hand corner is the Cantina Adventure set with the exclusive vintage-esque variants of Greedo, Walrus Man, Hammerhead, and Blue Snaggletooth. Then in the bottom right are Han and Chewie, and finally, rounding out the left corner is sort of a Mos Eisley checkpoint scene with the Sand Trooper, the new Land Speeder, Ben Kenobi, and deluxe Luke Skywalker. But to quote Bill Murray in Stripes, there is something wrong, something very, very wrong with this poster. And I'm not talking about the fact that Ben Kenobi is driving the land speeder. These Americans have got Luke on the wrong side, thinking that he's driving in America. No, what I'm talking about is the fact that the poster clearly says the Vintage Collection, which is Hasbro's 3 3/4 inch line of action figures and vehicles, but this action figure is not a 3 3/4 action figure. If we zoom in on the Sand Trooper in this vintage collection Return to Tatooine poster, we can see that it is not the 3 3/4 inch Sand Trooper from the 3 pack. It's the 6 inch Sand Trooper from the Black series. Now, I don't know if someone at Hasbro was trying to pull the old switcheroo or they just photoshopped the wrong image on the poster, but it's just something that I wanted to point out. So while we're looking at the Return to Tatooine poster, let's very quickly take a look at the new Han Solo. Technically, this is the newest Cantina Han Solo since 2004 with the original trilogy collection action figures. However, this same 2004 body was also used in 2009, the Death Star Escape Han Solo, and the 2011 Ceremonial Han, both of which came with a different head sculpt as an homage to the running change in the Kenner figures back in 1978 to 1979. Now, I pre-ordered this Han, but I'm not sure that I like it all that much better than the 2004 version. I get that the current trend is all the super articulation, but I would add the caveat that super articulation does not need to detract from the sculpt. And the wrists on this upcoming Han Solo are horrible. Also, if Hasbro is trying to emulate the ball joint pelvis like Marauder Gunrunners uses, I think they need to work a little more to close the thigh gap, so to speak. Depending upon how that head sculpt looks in person, I may just end up swapping the head sculpt and the holsters over to the 2004 figure, or I may swap some parts with the 2008 Han that came with the big Millennium Falcon. It would have been nice if Hasbro would have included some gloved hands to go with this that we could swap out. Now, I guess my main point on the Han Solo figure is that I think that the 2004 figure still holds up today. So I would have rather seen another Cantina patron as part of the Return to Tatooine campaign than a new Han Solo. I've got the same feelings towards the new Chewbacca. It's interesting that Hasbro mentioned that the new Chewie is a combination of the older figures with a new pelvis and legs. And to me, that is really a testament of how well the early 2000s figures have held up. Now, the thigh gap on the new Chewie is again too wide, and this is the same thing collectors complained about in 2010 with Bespin Luke. So it's incredible to me that it is still a sculpting issue in 2025. I think the 2005 Chewbacca still looks great today. And I get that some people want the ball joint thighs, they want the swivel thighs for all the play value, but for diorama display purposes, I think that the early bird Chewie still looks better overall. Now, the paint apps and the head sculpt on the new Chewie are amazing, but if you want a Chewie that has more of a neutral face sculpt, then again, you'll need the early bird Chewie, and hopefully some of these parts swap out because it's going to be interesting to see how it breaks down and whether we'll be able to customize parts back and forth. Now let's talk about the what's next in the epilogue of the Return to Tatooine campaign. In the Hasbro Pulse 2025 San Diego Comic-Con panel recap, Emily from the Hasbro design team mentioned that they have more Cantina figures in the work and that fans should see them soon. In the actual panel discussion, when Emily announced the new Han Solo figures, she referenced a previous sneak peek photo that showed the shadows of Han and Greedo's arms in one of the Cantina alcoves. Then she also mentioned a sneak peek image of the shadows of Ben Kenobi talking to Chewbacca. So in their slide presentation of the Haslab Cantina, they slipped this little image among all the other movie scene type shots. And you can find this image on Rebel Scum's Facebook page. It's on the post they made from San Diego Comic-Con on July 25th. So a lot of fans are thinking that once again, this is a sneak peek teaser to some upcoming figures. Now, I've read someone online, maybe on Yakface, that Emily later said that the new Cantina figures would not be re-releases like they did with Ponda Baba, Dr. Evazan, and Bomb Vimden, but nothing was said about new Cantina figures not being new sculpts. Now, because this image shows the shadows of four arms, some fans have gotten all excited over four new upcoming Cantina figures, but I've pointed out on social media and various fan site forums that this image may only depict three new action figures because the shadows reveal one left arm and three right arms, which suggest three, not four action figures. Also, think about this. Besides the Cantina Adventure 4-pack, which is a really unique homage to the vintage toy, all of the other Hasbro 4-packs are army builders of the same figure or thereabout. Think about how Hasbro released the Snow Trooper 4-pack, the Battle Droid 4-pack, Thrawn's Night Trooper 4-pack, the Phase 2 Clone Trooper 4-pack, the Imperial Officer 4-pack, the Cantina Band 7-pack. And then think about what the 3-packs are. You've got the Jedi Spirits 3-pack, three different figures. The Stormtroopers of the Empire 3-pack, the Scout Trooper, the Sand Trooper, the Snow Trooper 3-pack, three different figures. Anakin Skywalker 3-pack, Heir to the Empire 3-pack. Even after Hasbro released the Haslab Sail Barge, they only released more of Jabba's gift cards in a 3-pack, not a 4-pack. So I really think that this is going to be a Cantina 3-pack, not a Cantina 4-pack. So who do you think the top contenders for this 3-pack are? Well, some fans have speculated that one or both of these arms on the left belong to Arliel Schaus. The problem, though, is that these shadows, which I believe belong to the same character, have at least four digits in each hand, whereas Arliel Schaus's figure only has three. Plus, I don't think what little bit we can see of the arms matches Arliel Schaus's sleeves. So who do I think the top contender for these shadowy arms are? Muftak. Of all the Cantina patrons, very few had clawed hands like these in the shadows. Of the John Malo aliens from the Elstree studio scenes, only Regisk, the tall rodent alien, and Cabe, or Kabe, as some people pronounce it, these were the only two who had claw-like hands. All the other aliens either have the sucker hands like Ponda Baba, Zivits, and Wyosley, or they wear gloves, or they just had human hands. Now, personally, I don't think that there's enough demand for a Cabe resculpt, and I don't think Regix is an interesting enough character for Hasbro to ever fool with. And of the Rick Baker aliens, Arliel Schaus, the three different Godel aliens, and Mayo are the only other aliens who have clawed hands besides Muftak. But each of those only have three claws, and there are at least four claws shown on each hand in these shadows. Now, some of you may be thinking, but what about Lack Sivrak? Well, we never see Lack Sivrak's hands in the movie, and the only still shot or behind the scenes shots I can find of Lax Sivrak doesn't show his hands either. Also, I don't think Hasbro would update Lax Sivrak, who doesn't even appear in the special editions, before they update Muftak, who appears a few times in the film. The only thing that would make me think that this is not Muftak is that Muftak has 5 digits and the shadow looks to have 4 digits, but that could simply be the lack of details caught in the shadow. Actually, the right hand shadow image to me looks to have 5 digits. Along with that, I may be reading too much into this, but this texture here on the upper right reminds me of a furry body. So for whatever it's worth, I think this is Muftak, and honestly, I really hope it is. Now, moving on to the other two shadows, there's really not a whole lot to go off of, or is there? Not to get everyone's hopes up, but look closely at the bottom shadow, particularly right here. Doesn't that look like a long fingernail or a claw shadow over the top of that cup? And who do we know who has a hand with the long claw that's molded to hold a gun? This guy. Yeah, I'm very confident that the bottom right shadow is Arliel Schaus, which makes sense that they would go ahead and release him since that tooling is done. This way they can release the figure, but not necessarily on the vintage style card, which would have been the incentive for the Haslab Cantina tiers. So what about the last arm in the upper right hand corner? Well, it's tough to say because that could be a human hand or it could be a glove. And again, I may be reading too much into this, but right here to me looks like a long glove where the sleeve tucks into the glove like a Death Star trooper. I mean, even the arms seem to angle out from the wrist, implying some sort of glove worn over the sleeve. So if that's the case, then there are only two patrons that I can think of that this could be, and that's either Taz Ka, the walrus with the red whiskers who wears an outfit similar to a Death Star trooper, or the yellow spaceman who wears the yellow Bosk outfit, which I seriously doubt. Actually, I seriously doubt that Hasbro would ever make any of the other spacemen besides Boshek. Maybe they could get by with making Dan's Bourne since you can see his face through the helmet, but I'm thinking that since Lucasfilm borrowed the costumes from other films like the 1964 film The First Men on the Moon and the Planet of the Apes movies, that there may be some legal rights to selling action figures that have that complete look. So, like, it's one thing to make a Bosk or a Boshek action figure because of the mask and the arms, the actor's likeness, but it's probably another thing to make the other spacemen because their total costumes are pretty much right off the shelf, so to speak, the same costumes and design used in the other films. And Reactions has already made an astronaut Cornelius action figure from the Planet of the Apes, and it even has that same helmet. So again, there may be some proprietary rights to selling a toy with the complete look of a character that appears in another film. And I hope that I'm reading too much into the angles of the shadows because if this is Tasca, I'll be torn since Hasbro has already released a very similar version of this figure with Moset Benid, and I already have a really cool custom Tasca that I've made. And I'll tell you who I really hope this action figure is, or that we get a carded update of this character in the future, and that is Elor's Madak. The reason why I really want an updated Elor's Madak is twofold. For one, he's an iconic Star Wars character who really needs an updated sculpt. And two, fans could use an updated Elor's Madak to customize Dan's Boren and the other two spacemen, since all three of them wear similar or the exact same Planet of the Apes spacesuits as Eller's Maydak. So once again, my predictions for the upcoming soon Cantina 3-pack based on this sneak peek image are Muftak, Arliel Schaus, and not necessarily a prediction, but who I hope it is, Elor's Maydak. Also, I'm not sure how soon is for Emily at Hasbro, but it would be nice if these were revealed with pre-orders open by the end of October. Well, that's it for this episode of Cantina Customs. Comment below on who you think the next Cantina figures will be. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.